I am very, very happy to have here tonight with us Jacqueline Urbani, Jackie, and Candace Monroe Speed. So I'm gonna give you just a little background on them really quick, and then I will let them say anything else that they want to say about themselves. Jackie is currently an associate professor and director of early childhood special education at Mills College at Northeastern University in Oakland, California. She began her career at the Pennsylvania School for the Deaf, where she used American Sign Language for instruction. During her 12 years there, she taught preschool and middle school grades. She's also been a professor for 12 years, teaching elementary and special education, credentials and master's degree programs. She has a passion for social equity, earned her doctorate in special education from a joint program between University of California, Berkeley and San Francisco State University, and her master's from, I am going to butcher this, I should know this, and you can correct me, Jackie, Gallaudet University in Washington, D.C. And I love this. She's participated in a lot of women's marches, including proudly joining one in Antarctica, so that we were all 7 continents were represented in the women's marches. So that's, you're going to have to talk about that because that's pretty amazing. And then very happy to have alongside of her Candace, who is an educational specialist at Martinez Junior High School and has taught in multiple school settings in public, private, charter, county run, university, you name it. She holds a master's degree from Dominican University of California in special ed and a bachelor's degree from Arizona State University in interdisciplinary studies. She strives to make school a safe learning environment for students and for teachers of color. Her goal is to be I cut this off on the description, a bridge. I'm assuming a bridge to equality and acceptance for everybody in the school. She's a California Education Policy Fellowship Program alum and a core member of her school district's DEI committees and leads her school's Positive Behavior Intervention and Support Committee. So that was a lot. I know 2 speakers, but I wanted to give you their background because pretty badass ladies there. So I'm going to kick it over to them and we will get started.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for being here with us tonight. So we are talking with you about how to use books to talk about topics that that we actually don't want to talk to kids about sometimes, most of the time. Here's our agenda for the day. We're first going to talk about our own discomfort and what we can do about that. Also going to talk about the rationale for this presentation, the benefits of learning diversity, those benefits that children receive. And we're going to talk about how to choose books. We have tons of resources about how to find good books. And we're also going to talk about how do you actually engage with your child in reading. And this presentation is based on an article that we wrote that was for teachers, where we used one book and explained how to talk about the different aspects. So here we're kind of adapting that for how can parents do this. But certainly if you're an educator, we hope you take this to your classroom as well. Then we'll talk about extension activities. How can you continue the learning beyond the book? And we have lots and lots of resources for you. And then we'll do questions and comments. We also want to say we've asked the Julies and Tanya to interrupt us if there are questions. So if you have a question about a particular slide, you can put it up in the chat and we will try and answer it as we go. I always figure if one person has a question on a slide, then probably several people have a question on that slide. So I'd rather provide the information then when you all need it. Okay.
Right. So we created a Google Drive that's full of our resources. There's the PDF to our article, the slideshow that we're here for you, that's up for you now, a handout that you can print out and give to your child's teachers that tells them why they should be doing this in the classroom and like try to give them supports, and then strategies and support on how to pick books and while you're reading what you can do for that as well. So while we're going through, if you see a little picture icon, it all refers back to this Google Drive resource.
Okay, so we want to talk about our discomfort when we're talking to kids. The article we wrote was mostly about racial issues, but racial issues, gender issues, ethnicity, religion. There's so many ways that we other each other and that we make someone bad. And so one of the problems with that is that we've had very poor curriculum in the United States to teach us about other people. Our social studies books are mostly about what the fabulous white men did. And there's very little mention of any other contributors, women, Native Americans, whoever that may be. So we haven't been taught about this information ourselves. And it's a little bit awkward to then try and want to talk to a child about it. So sometimes we have to do our own research so we can actually go ahead with that. There's also been a lack of representation and positive representation of diversity within those social studies books. So one of the concerns that causes us discomfort is that, should kids be learning about these different injustices and differences just in general? And it is really important because even young toddlers are aware of racial differences, and that will start kind of growing in them. Prejudice develops in young children around 5 to 7 and then comes back again as an early teenager. So we do want to be talking to kids about issues of diversity during those times so they don't develop those prejudices. Another reason that we are uncomfortable is we don't want the white kids to be ashamed. And if kids are shamed, we're not doing it right. So the point is not to put shame on people. The point is to identify injustices and then do something about it. And so that's why when we're talking to kids, and when we're talking to kids in schools in particular, it's not about you all should feel bad about this. It's you should feel badly that this happened, but there is no responsibility on you. There is responsibility on you to identify what's happening in the world now and act on that, and do the same thing for the future. So there's been a lot of concern and talk about how we don't want the white kids to be shamed, which quite frankly annoys me. We don't talk about what it means for diverse kids to not see themselves in their social studies books, in their general books, and there's not learning about them. So I think while we don't want white kids to be shamed, more important is that we want diverse students to recognize their value and for all of us to learn about the contributions of people who are different than us. So we are sharing this presentation because of these important things for kids, but also because of what's happened with the politicalization of teaching and the gag orders. So you all are aware of the book bans and Ron DeSantis, where woke goes to die. Nikki Haley, we've never been a racist country. These quotes are so misguided and wrong. And I don't quite understand how woke became a bad word, because asleep means you're literally unconscious and unaware of what's happening in the world. So I think woke is a wonderful way to be. The other reason is the Florida Department of Education looked at the African American Studies, the AP class, and this is a direct quote, said it significantly lacks educational value. So imagine being a person of color or a person of diversity, but imagine being a little kid and hearing that African American studies, there's no educational value. Like, what does that do to a young child's soul? So we want to address that with working on this kind of work. And so helping you as parents help teachers to do this work in their schools. And we have in our folder, there's the little icon. If you click on that icon, it will take you directly to that resource in the Google Drive. And we have strategies and supports. And on page 1, we have in particular ways to fight back. So what you can do in face of all this, in your community.
Doing this work benefits kids socially and academically. As Jackie said, our National Council of Social Studies has put out that it is important to engage students in elements of democracy. It's also a vital part of of our learning. Students gain a greater appreciation for their own and others' cultures when they are exposed to these things. They are more engaged and respectful citizens, and they can recognize injustices and then respond in a way that to future wrongs that can enact change. By using these diverse read alouds, the students will learn to identify the similarities they have with other students, the differences, and then find joy in their collective experiences and have pride for all Americans. Academically, when we engage in these read alouds with students, they learn true American history. They achieve academically higher. They learn how to think critically to make decisions based on multiple perspectives. If we're just taking in one side of the story, we cannot make a true, honest, good decision on moving forward. They learn how to base their opinions based on evidence and not just prejudice that they may have held in the past. And they examine the complexity of cause and effect and the impact that it has over time. These benefits are listed on our tool that you can print out to bring to your teachers, your students' classroom if you'd like to.
There we go. So in our article, we talk about different ways to choose quality books. It's hard to find quality books, and so we wanted to give you what researchers say are the things to look for. So one is authenticity. We want to ensure that there are multiple perspectives around one situation, that we're not just hearing about the white men and how it was wonderful that they colonized. We also need to hear about the Native Americans. We also need to hear about women in that era. And we want students to rely on evidence and primary source documents. Unfortunately, in our history classes, we don't really ask kids to think about multiple perspectives and ask for evidence, but that's exactly what historians do. Historians want to know what are the multiple perspectives and how do they all relate within this situation. Historians also rely on primary source documents, so journals, notes, documentation such as that. The next one is quality. So you want to look at the text and illustrations. Is this a good story? Is this, sometimes the illustrations are almost better than the words. You want to see a positive representation of people with diversity. People who have marginalized identities, we want them to be shown in a positive light in the stories. And look for books that have received awards and other recognitions. We also want to look for text-to-child connections, which is sharing similarities and differences between themselves and what they're reading. If you're trying to read to your child about one of these marginalized identities, how do you draw similarities and differences between yourself and them? We also want that so that the kids are helped to challenge their stereotypes that we hear and see so that we can combat bias. The other one is democratic values, which, kid you not, Rachel Maddow last night was talking about how some Republicans were saying, we don't want a democratic nation. So Candace and I think this is really important, and we hope you all do too, to have democratic values, but we want to look for that when we're looking for books to read to kids. We want it to support the ideals of democracy and equality. And we also want to look at how can we build conflict resolution strategies. So to find quality books, we have on the Google Drive, if you look here on the bottom left, it says, see the Google Drive. We have a folder that has 3 different resources for you. We have gender expansive learning. I think there's a guideline for choosing books with them as well. And then we have other resources that we've put together for you. One of the best, we think, comes from Teaching for Change. So this top part here with all of the book covers, they have so many different kinds of books, kind of diversity around religion, around color, around immigration, ability, thank you. It's a great, great resource. We've listed several others, but this is our favorite. And then also with social justice books, in the middle here, you'll see they actually have a guide for selecting anti-biased children's books. So similar to what we just presented, but they have some more information as well.
All right, so you understand the importance, you've picked out a really good book. How do you do this? If we're gonna ask the kids to do reflections on themselves and the perspectives that they hear in the stories, we need to do some self-reflection first as well. So before reading this book with your child, you should read the book to yourself first. And then ask yourself, where is my level of discomfort or comfort with this topic? What makes me uneasy? Why is this making me uneasy? And then from your answers to those questions, engage in a little bit more further learning, so you feel more secure,
That you know the
yeah.
information.
And then you want to start anticipating questions that your child may ask you while you're reading the story. So what things do you think your kid is going to be curious about? And maybe try to prep those answers beforehand so you can have them ready for them when they get there. Yeah. Here are some sample questions that you can ask during reading. How do you think a character felt in this situation or event? What would make them feel that way? How did this event or situation make you feel? Who was telling the story? Are we missing anybody's perspective or voice in this story? And let these questions guide you into further extension activities and continue the learning. And it's okay to not know the answers. It's okay to say, you know, I'm not sure about that, but how about we find out the answer together? Let's do some research together.
The other thing is you want to read the book multiple times, not just once. It's not a one and done. And kids are great for that because they love their books.
Once you're done reading, you do more self-reflection. Was there anything that made you uncomfortable this time during the reading? What questions arose that we need to keep exploring? Does my child want to learn more about this topic? Then how can I learn more about this topic? And again, going back to the perspectives, what other perspectives do we need to bring into this conversation so we can have a holistic idea of what happened, the truth?
So when we talk about extension activities, we want your children to continue to learn beyond just the book. So what else can you do about that? So the other thing is if you have multiple children across ages, you can read on the same topic across these different levels. So on the left, we have a book, Let the Children March. This is the book that we highlighted in our article. It has been a contested book. Some people have asked that it be banned. Don't understand why. It's a lovely, lovely story. We've Got a Job is written by Cynthia Levinson, who might be here tonight. If you are, thank you. And this is a wonderful book that has primary source documents. It has pictures of the activities of the march itself. And then on the right, there's a book for higher secondary. We Were the Fire, Birmingham, 1963. And they all relate to the Children's March in Birmingham in 63, which I didn't know about until we started researching for our article, which is embarrassing because it's a beautiful, beautiful story of kids taking on a voice and making a difference
When their parents couldn't.
Mm-hmm. You can also connect similar topics across books. So in the middle, I Am Ruby Bridges. We all know her story as a little girl integrating school, but we don't know other people's stories. So Separate is Never Equal is Sylvia Mendez, and her family fought for desegregation a whole decade before Ruby Bridges. And Free to Learn, this is Cynthia Levinson again. This book just came out. This was a little boy who was born in Mexico and came to America, and they said, you weren't born here, so you don't get to go to school. And that sadly, that went to the Supreme Court in the 70s. Other fun things to do, go on family field trips, go to protests, go to festivals, go to different museums, go to places that, maybe take an hour or so to get there, but that will enrich all of your understanding and all of your learning about these different topics.
as we've highlighted a lot already, we have tons of resources for you. So if this is something that you want to do or that you would like to see in your children's schools, please, please use these resources.
And this one in particular, we titled it a handout for teachers. So we know teachers are really struggling right now and being told that they can't talk about race at all. They might lose their job. It's not a good place to be a teacher right now. This little handout, which Candace put together, thankfully, has references of people who said this, where can they find that information so that they can show that to parents, to administrators, to governors as they need to in terms of teaching this history.
And includes links to great sources.
Mm-hmm.
So in conclusion, learning about diversity isn't meant to polarize us and bring us apart. It's the opposite. It's meant to bring us together and help us celebrate our differences and our similarities and make us a better community and a better democracy. Again, it emphasizes critical thinking, empathy, and understanding. It encourages conversations about responsible citizenship that'll hopefully help them grow up to be great citizens in the future. And it highlights the power that our children and our youth have in making positive change. Like once they start seeing the world around them, you start having conversations about different injustices you see and how can we change them.
Okay. Questions or comments?
So I just want to let you know, Cynthia is in the audience. She's been commenting. Thank you for the titles that you've been using. Someone wanted to know, how do you introduce some of these books to homeschool families?
I would introduce it the same. I would introduce it to a teacher in a traditional school setting. That's or you mean just like introducing them where to find books? I would give them our resource. The handout for teachers is a perfect one to go to. It has links in the back to those websites that we showed you, the screenshots. I feel that would be the easiest way.
And then the book list, because that was a wonderful book list that you were showing. Can you get that to Julie so she can send that out to everybody?
Absolutely.
Is that part of the Google Docs that you already shared? Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, is it in the resources you already shared?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. And then some folks were having trouble getting into the Google Drive. Is there a trick? Some people were saying you need to sign into Google, so I don't know if that fixed the problem for them or not, but I just, any specific trick? I'm always in Google, so I don't know.
Yeah, it worked for me. I think someone's not signed in or something. I was able to click it in link in, no problem. So
and so how fearful are you that some of these books might be banned by some of the states?
Sorry, we're looking to open up the Google Drive. Can you ask that question again for me?
Sure. I said, how fearful are you that some of these books might be banned by some of the states, or are they already on the banned book list?
Some of the books from this resource, the social justice website, some of them have been banned. And so I don't want to tell any teacher to put their job on the line, but I also think we can read books that aren't banned that still talk about these topics that we need to at home. Yeah. For teachers, I would really try and support the work that they're doing. We need to be a little bit louder and help teachers because they're really going through a hard time right now. Florida, you can't even say DEI anymore. I was just at a conference and they said, how can we be culturally responsive teachers if we can't say DEI? So I think I'm hoping we all motivate each other to get out there and support teachers more and saying there's a way that we can talk about these uncomfortable conversations. Let the Children March. I believe it was put on the contested list because it says that the white police officers attack the children. And which they did. It's one page in the entire book. It's not a book about violence. So we need to talk about how you get past, how other people need to get past, but how all of us need to get past. Like, I don't want to say to kids, like, these adults were like hurt children. I don't want to share that with kids, actually. That makes me uncomfortable. but it's also the truth. And what came of that is the children then got the laws reversed, and their town was desegregated.
I would, oh, sorry.
I was going to say, not that that ended the problem, but what they were aiming for was successful, and they were like little kids.
I'd also add in using primary source documents. If the book is banned, the document is like, that's our history. That's it would be hard to ban that. So maybe use that route.
Well, someone did say that their teacher friends are not even able to use Read Alouds until they're cleared by county officials. And so I don't know if that's happening in a lot of places. I suspect the answer to that is yes. But you know, so the primary source documents, I guess, is a great suggestion. But you know, I don't know. I think folks have to be careful about their jobs too.
Yeah, maybe what teachers could do is suggest these books to parents, and parents read the stories, so that it's not on the teacher. I think teaching should be like journalism, or like journalism before. You shouldn't know if someone's a Democrat or a Republican. They should just be sharing the information. That's the role of a journalist. That's the role of a teacher. But people get upset when we share more than one side, and when some people look bad. And I think it's okay that actions taken are recognized for being wrong. And how do we avoid that in the future? So I would say, if there are topics that your teacher or your child's teacher wants to be learning about, can they share books with you that you can read at home? So it's not on the teacher to have that responsibility. But then they can be talking about what they've been learning as they've been, and what a wonderful connection between home and school.
So, Julie, you want to come on and ask some of the ones that you had?
Yep. Hold on one second. I'm going to jump on here. Okay. Well, thank you both for the presentation. We really, really appreciate that. Now, I want to make sure people understand, so that you both, you know, researched this and wrote an article on this topic. So what prompted you to dive into this topic?
So it's a bit of a long story. We had responded to a call for a book, for an academic book, on how to introduce multicultural learning in schools. And so
Social studies.
yeah, specifically social studies. So I got the call. I asked Candace to join me, and Bhavya Doshi to join me as well in creating that. And we wrote an article on 3 different kinds of diversity. We talked about disability, the LGBTQ+ community, and immigration. And we had a book, a children's book, for each one of those topics. And here's what might be awkward, and here's how you can read about it. Here's other extension activities. Here's similar books. If you're interested in that chapter, send one of us an email, because we can't just share it with you directly. The article you can share directly. My college paid an open access fee, so you do not need a subscription to get that journal. So please share it with all the teachers you know. So anyway, we published our chapter. We were getting the final proofs back when George Floyd was murdered. And we said, we have to do something. Teachers are going to need help. This is a horrible thing to have to talk about with kids, but they're going to hear about it and they're going to see part of it. They need information. And so we wrote about police violence and Black Americans, and nobody accepted it. Nobody wanted to touch it. It's too biased. Before the trial, they said you can't say murder, which just, infuriated us. And yes, we were biased, but did you see the video? And so then we tried that for a while. And then we got inspiration from Ron DeSantis, because he said, don't say gay. And Florida said that African-American studies doesn't offer any educational value. So we said, teachers need help with this. So we wrote the article to really be a guide for teachers about how, and I would love for teachers to just give this really to their parents, to their administrators. Here's the reasons why we think it's important and why research says it's important to give kids this kind of history. So that's where the inspiration for the article came
It's
from.
less biased, but more user-friendly for anything.
Yeah.
So one of the things you talked about was that, if a parent feels uncomfortable, they want to read a book, maybe, about desegregating the schools or what, any of the other topics that you covered, and they don't really feel comfortable. And you mentioned this in your presentation, and you said, do some like pre-learning. Do you have recommendations? Because like, there are so many amazing books, but maybe you want to read this book tomorrow night to your child and you don't have the time to read the entire, a novel or, a thesis, I guess, about the topic. What are some, do you have any good recommendations of places to go for maybe short videos or organizations that people could, check out? I'm putting you a little bit on the spot, but I just was hoping to maybe help define some of that pre-learning and like where parents could look for those resources.
You want to go?
You can go. I was like, they're going to ask this question.
I would start with Wikipedia. If you do have something that you want to read tomorrow with your child and you need more information about it, go there. Wikipedia does tend to offer more than one perspective, and they also list their resources. So you can go to the resources that they list to help you better understand the topic so that you can explain it to your child. I also, and Candace mentioned this before, it's a great thing to say, I don't know enough about this either. So let's read this book together and figure out what else we want to learn about. Let's figure out who else we need to hear from.
And I believe you mentioned in the presentation, and I think this is important too, in terms of, I guess, any tips on like thinking through what your child might ask, because you kind of want to prepare, you want to learn too. And I love that. I love that. Like, hey, I'm learning this too. We're going to learn about this together. But thinking through and anticipating, and especially for teachers in classrooms, like what are kids going to raise their hands and just blurt out and say? Any tips on like preparing for that?
I would think starting with the questions that we suggested for the during reading questions, and then reflect. Your child better than we do. What are questions that they normally ask when things are difficult? What are things that you normally are talking about when they see something on the news or hear something? What is something that's interesting to them then that's probably going to come back during the book?
Jack, I don't want to cut you off, Jackie. Do you have anything you wanted to add to that, or?
She did a great job.
She did a great job. And you touched on this a little bit too about what you're hearing from teachers. I guess you mentioned, maybe the teachers who are in states where they really are kind of like not able to like do these read alouds or have these conversations. Are teachers finding that parents are receptive to doing this at home or to getting those resources from their teachers to be able to have these conversations at home? Or are they almost like handcuffed and can't even like suggest things to parents?
I think it depends on where you are. I also think, and I think I learned this at one of your book ban sessions a couple weeks ago, that there's a very small number of parents who have been putting in all these requests to ban books. So it's not the majority of us. Most of us want this information out there, and we just need to make our voices louder. So I would say that's definitely kind of one thing to think about there. I also got an email from a professor of teacher education in Georgia when she read the article, and she said, this is exactly what my teachers need. So again, we want the article to be a support that they can say, the National Council of Social Studies says this is what we're supposed to do. The Common Core State Standards says this is what we're supposed to do. So, so we're doing it. And here's the research on how it's beneficial to kids.
Absolutely. I know you've listed some great resources here. Any suggestions for parents, in terms of finding more books? Because a lot of my kids are adults, so they're past this point where they want me to read to them. But I know they had a voracious, appetite for books. They always wanted bedtime stories. They always wanted to have these things. Any suggestions beside the resources you're providing of where, places to go, who they can talk to about like finding the books that they think are going to interest their kids?
the library and your local bookstore. The bookstore owner of the Alibi Bookshop where I live, she's a great source of information to help me find books. I would use those two places as a great, like, if you're going beyond our list that we've already given you.
And I did see in the comments that there was a media specialist who was saying how much she appreciated when parents made recommendations for great books to buy and bring into the school. So that, that would be really fabulous. So
Someone also said something about finding folks who actually lived through the experience for some of the, and that is also a good resource for because they're not a book.
telling real life stories.
They're a primary source.
I mean,
Yeah, they're a primary source that probably can't be banned, right? They're allowed to tell their own story, although who knows? Okay. Are there any other questions in the chat, Julie? Or
I was going to add, in California, we have the First Five organization. They're a wonderful organization for kids 0 through 5 years old and promoting literacy and health and all these things. Our local one is really great at providing books and book suggestions and activities to go with books too. So maybe in your local area, there's an organization similar to that as well.
great suggestion. Any other thing in the chat that?
Yeah, someone asked for the DOI to the article. DOI.
Yes.
You got it.
You can drop that in the chat.
Yeah. Give me a second.
I was gonna say, if you guys have any other questions, please drop them in the chat. And while Jackie's doing that, I would be remiss. I know this is not on topic, Jackie, but I am very curious about your Antarctica trip. So I just would love for you to share how in the world you ended up in Antarctica, and just share a little bit about that. And we'll see if there's any other questions.
Okay. And I do think that you might need a Gmail account to get into the Google Slides or the Google folder, but let us know if you're still struggling. We could always email you the information as well.
Maybe drop your emails in the chat if you haven't already, just to be safe.
Okay.
Maybe we should put up our contact slide.
Oh, there you go. So Antarctica, my husband David and I had seen a presentation on Antarctica. We're very interested in seeing it, and it took us about 10 years before we got there. And then I realized the trip was planned for January, and I was kind of horrified to find out that I was going to be missing the inauguration of the first woman president. And actually considered, should we change the trip? And then, of course, Trump happened, and I couldn't have been more excited to be literally as far away from him as possible for the inauguration. But then the Women's March was happening, and then I was upset that I was going to be missing that. But one of the women who was on the boat, her name is Linda Zunis. She lives in Oakland, and she planned a march. So she had a poster making party one day. She had brought all the supplies, and we took a picture of all of us on the boat, and she sent that into the Women's Marchers organizers. And then the next day we actually were marching up, literally up the hill, and like penguins were walking past us. But it was wonderful to hear that I think we all felt so connected that we were part of that. But my parents were dog sitting. Hi, Mom and Dad. They were at our house, and they went to the San Francisco March with our cousin. My other sister took my niece in Portland. My other sister from Portland flew to DC. My cousin from Philly met her there for the march. So it really felt like our whole family was involved in this march, and it just felt really, really wonderful.
Okay, well, I love that, because when I read that in your bio, I'm like, I gotta figure out how she was in Antarctica doing a march. So that's a really, really great story. So I did not see any more questions in the chat, and we have the resources. So just so everybody knows, I will send an email out with the link to these resources. Up on the screen, you have their email addresses. So if that's not working for you and you want to email them directly, they can get you that information. So I want to thank you both. I know you took a lot of time to prepare these slides for everybody, and coming in and taking the time to answer the questions and share the information. We truly appreciate it. And any Any closing remarks, anything you want to say before we sign off?
Just thanks for coming tonight, and really feel emboldened to go talk with your children about these topics and support your teachers in doing so as well.
Happy reading.
Thanks.
Definitely happy reading.